I've not met before. Some I did meet on our move back here to Fort Worth. Those of you that don't know me, my name's Armando Vera. We used to worship here several years ago and since moved back to the area. I was fortunate enough to marry one of the many daughters of the Craig household, and such. I've got my beautiful family here as well. And so that's a bit about who I am, and as we get a chance to talk, if I've not met you before, we'll get a chance to meet you a little bit further as well. So, but what do you say when you introduce yourself to somebody? What is it that you reveal about yourself? Besides your name, you might say something about where you work, maybe what you do for work, where you're from, maybe if you're married or you have kids. And while it may not be the most important aspect of who you are, it warrants a certain level of importance because you make it a point to be. You reveal that of yourself from the get-go. It's one of the first things that you share with people about who you are. Fill in this blank. We know that God is what? What is God? You might say a bunch of different things in your mind. God is love. God is kind. God is just, all-powerful, all-righteous. And you wouldn't be incorrect to say all that. Right? But in the beginning, in the beginning of the Bible, we learn something about God as he introduces himself into Scripture. Let's look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Out of all the things that we can learn about God from the very get-go of Scripture, the first thing we learn about him is that he is creative. He created the heavens and the earth. It's really interesting, and I think it's very, very important to note that. Again, as you would introduce yourself to somebody here, one of the first things that God introduces himself to us is he is creative. That is in his nature, to be creative. Now, why is that important? Well, we go further down in verse 26. We see, then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish, and over the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. But he starts that verse saying, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Knowing that God is creative, and that we were created in his image, should tell us that we have a small semblance of who God is. Now, I often wonder, in the way that we are as personalities here, just sense of humor. I often wonder how God's sense of humor would be. I'm curious to hear what that sounds like and what that seems like. Turn of phrase that he may use there. But although we may not have every aspect of God in us, every part of us, the good parts, are from God. Our being, our abilities, our goodness, all come from him. And because God is creative, I believe that he's embedded in each and every one of us also a sense of creativity. I believe that we all have a small portion of a want, a desire to create something. That could be in the arts. My wife's a fantastic artist. It could be in relationships. It could be in the realm of business. It could be in cooking, in teaching. It could be in writing, simply sitting with somebody and being a good friend. I think God has placed inside of us this small seed of creativity, the seed that God will help us increase, but we must do our part in tending to that seed. See, when it comes to growth, as Justin mentioned, seems to be the theme of today. When it comes to growth, God expects growth. Humans are the only thing that has the intentional capability of not reaching its full potential. When you see a tree growing outside, the tree doesn't decide, that's good enough. No, it continues to grow until it reaches its maximum. Same as with a fish or with a bird or an elephant, right? There isn't a moment when an animal can make a conscious choice to stop improving and growing. Humans, on the other hand, because of how we are created, we can stunt our own growth. We're the only ones that can intentionally keep ourselves from reaching the highest levels that God expects from us. Let's look further in Genesis chapter 1. Looking down at verse 27 is where we're going to continue on with our thoughts here. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." So the first thing we learned about God is that he is creative, and it's just as interesting. The first thing that God told man after he created them, be fruitful and multiply. That's the first thing he tells them after he creates them. Now, for a long time, I associated this phrase with the simple growth of mankind. Right? God tasking Adam and Eve, and in turn, the rest of mankind to have children and grow the human population. Now, while I don't think this definition is incorrect, I do think that leaving it at only that, it limits the scope of what God has in store for his creation. So I don't think it's just limited to the growth of mankind there, but there's so much more that goes into those words of being fruitful and multiplying. So the word fruitful in the Hebrew, it's the word para. It means to bear fruit, or to bring forth fruit, to grow, and to increase. And this could be a literal sense or a figurative sense. And to multiply, it's raba, to increase in whatever respect, abundance, grow up, nourish, to be or become great, to become many, or to become much, or to become numerous. So these words of being fruitful and multiplying has so much more than just the growth of the human population. A fruit, as we've just sung here, in and of itself, the seed has the seed necessary to bring forth more fruit. Right? Embedded inside of an apple seed is not only the ability to grow more apples, but to grow the tree, to grow the roots, to grow the leaves. Inside of each of us, we have the seed to grow so much more than what we are or what we start with. The command, therefore, from God to Adam and Eve and subsequently to the rest of mankind is to grow, to bear fruit, to become numerous, to become great. Be fruitful and multiply. Not add, multiply. So let's look at what that looks like in terms of the examples we find in Scripture. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 25 and the parable of the talents. We'll be here for quite a while here for the majority of our lesson. So I invite you to be there with me here. Matthew chapter 25, we're going to begin in verse 14. The parable of the talents. So let's see the lessons that we can learn about growth from the parable of the talents. Before we begin, I want to bring some real world context to the story, some current world context, I suppose you could think of, to the story before we begin. Now, I know this made a big impact on me on how I thought about this parable as we do this. So go with me on this thought experiment that we have here, okay? So a talent varies in weight based on the region, but a good general weight is about 70 pounds. Okay, now even if I'm off, I think we understand that a talent is a lot, right? It's considered a huge amount. But we'll go with the idea of 70 pounds. So we'll use this measurement to extrapolate a few current numbers. All right, so we take 70 pounds. Now the current price of gold that I looked up here on Friday night, going to Saturday morning, was $2,800 per ounce. So $2,800 an ounce for gold right now, current day. Well, there's 16 ounces in a pound. All right, so 1 pound of gold would equal $44,800 current time. All right, so we take 1 pound, multiply times 70, 1 pound of gold, we're looking at $3,136,000. And in the context of this example right here, 2 talents looks at $6,272,000. 5 talents, we're looking at $15,680,000. All right, so that we'll apply it to our parable here. So again, we're going to go on this thought experiment here, again, just to give it a bit more real life context right now, okay? So if I put in things right here as a words, don't be too concerned here. We're just using this real world context right here as we read through this parable. So let's look at verse 14. Read with me, please. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one, he gave $15,680,000. To another, he gave $6,272,000. And to another, he gave $3,136,000, each according to his own ability. And he went on his journey. And immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents, for a total of $31,360,000. In the same manner, the one who had received 2 talents gained 2 talents more, for a total of $12,544,000. But he who had received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money of $3,136,000. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. And the one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted me with $15,680,000. See, I have gained the same, $15,680,000 for a total of $31,360,000. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Also the one who had received 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. And now I return to you $12,544,000. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one also who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is the $3,136,000 of what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked slave, you lazy slave. You knew that I reaped where I did not sow and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore take away the $3,136,000 and give it to the one that has $31 million. So now he has $34,496,000. For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But for the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. Throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So now I don't know about you, and I know there's a lot of numbers there, but they're just big numbers. And I hope for you, as it was for me, it took on a new life of context to go, wow, they were entrusted with a lot of money. Like they had a lot upon that I want to bring into context here right here as far as what God expects of us from growth. So looking back at verse 15, and we'll go through these quickly. There's several that I have, but I won't take too long through these. But verse 15, he gave each of them, what does it say? According to their ability. Right? We don't have the ages of these slaves here. We don't know how old they were or how skilled they were. The only thing that we do know is that they were given different talents. And because they were given different talents, I would assume that they have different skill sets. The one that had 5, the one that had 2, and the one that had 1. All were able to manage what was given to them. Right? So they had different skill sets there, all given to certain abilities. Everybody in here right now is of different talents, right? Some people in here have 5, some people have 1, some people have 2, some people have 10, some people have 3, some people have, it's all different in here, right? And that's a good thing, right? But it's, right. So it not being equal is okay. As we looked at verse 16, immediately It says, the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them. So right away, the servant had the skill to manage the 5 talents, just like the one with 2. They had the skill to manage what was given to them. But to go and increase it, in this case, to double it, took a whole brand new skill set. One that they didn't know. But they went immediately to go and start trading with this. They took this money that could very easily be lost, stolen from them, taken from them, and they went and worked with it and traded. They leveraged what was given to them to leverage into more and grow it up, right? It took a more complex set of skills at the end, but it made them better for it. And because they were better for it there, they were able to use those talents to grow it, right? It's going to be hard. It was going to be difficult for them to grow it, but they had to go do it anyways. There's a public speaker, he's now since passed away, by the name of Jim Rohn. He was, if you all follow Tony Robbins, Tony Robbins is one of his mentors. And one of Jim Rohn's mentors, as he was growing, and he told him, you need to become a millionaire. He said, become a millionaire not for the $1 million, but for what it will make of you to achieve it. I said, wow. What it would cost of you, what it would make of you, what you would have to become, what would you have to do to become a millionaire. That was the challenge, right? And this is what the servants here as well were doing. They were taking on this challenge to grow it. It would take more of them to become more, to get more back from them. Looking down at verse 19, right, we see that the master comes back. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled the accounts for them. It wouldn't be right or proper or to expect for the master to come back, and he couldn't or wouldn't be able to expect for there to be a lot of growth if he'd come back very quickly. It took time. He had to have gone by, and it took time for these amounts to increase in the way that they did, right? So it takes time to build up those talents. It takes time to invest in yourself and invest in others to grow those talents. Not only is it difficult, but it takes the effort and the time. In verse 21 and 23, right, the master tells them, you were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. If I came over here and I gave you $15 million, would you feel like that was a few things? Right? Or came back right here with double that, right? So we're looking at $30 million. And here you go. Is this a few things? Right? To put it into that context, the master to come back and say, wow, you did a good job with a few things. I will entrust you with a lot of things. Right? I think it puts into context of how God sees just a perspective. Right? These are the few things that were given into you here, more than you can even imagine. The abundance will grow. And then we get to the man with the 1 talent. Verse 24, also verse 26, because it replicates the same idea. Right? In verse 24. And the one also who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. Only understanding it better. It's why was that fair for the master to have reaped somewhere else or sown where he did not scatter seed? And the reason is because those that were given the talents did just that. When they went to go trade, not in the area of the master, not in that vicinity. They went to go trade with somebody else that wasn't part of the master's family. They went to go trade somewhere else here to gain those skills there. They went and used that and leveraged it and grew their talents somewhere else. And when it came back, the master was able to pull from those seeds from somewhere where he didn't sow. He was able to reap from somewhere else that wasn't planted. Right? That's the expectation. When we're endowed with these gifts and these blessings of skill, in this case money, but the word talent, I think it's very creatively chosen. We're able to bring back, when we use those talents, we're able to bring back blessings and gifts and seeds and sown for God in other places. That's what God expects of us. Not a nation of growth, and it needed to return from outside of that vicinity. In verse 25, this is really key. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent. And I was afraid. Don't you think the other 2 servants were also afraid? I mean, what about them? It's not okay for them to be afraid too? But it wasn't the answer. It wasn't okay enough for him to be afraid. It wasn't okay. That wasn't a good reason. I was afraid. And look at verse 26. But his master answered and said to him, "You wicked and lazy slave." You know, in the initial reading, you read it and you're like, this guy was pretty good. Like, he was safe, essentially took the money and put it under his mattress, right? It was safe, it was secure, he didn't take any risk with it, he wasn't going to lose it, right? At least it didn't diminish, it didn't go down. He still had what he had beforehand, he had the value of it, he kept it safe there. You think, I'm going to put it into a savings account, it's fine, it's all right, like nothing, it's fine. It's going to be okay, when he comes back, I can give it back to him here. You know, I'm not going to take any risk with it there. But instead of being called a prudent and wise servant, he's called wicked and lazy. Again, another one that I struggled with for a long time. Like, what? But he took care of it. But these other ones did more here. As a matter of fact, you can kind of think of it as they took more of a risk. They went out and did some more. And because of that, the master rewards them. He says, "Well done, good and faithful servants. You went and did something with it." And that's something that I think we need to keep in mind here when we're growing and we're afraid to increase our talents. Whatever it might be. Oh, I'm not good at that thing. Good. Go do that thing. Go and increase that talent. Oh, I'm not good at it. Yeah, you're not going to be good at it. You're going to be really bad at it, as a matter of fact, when you first start. Horrible. You're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. Go do it anyways. For what it will make of you to be that. It really stuck with me here that I was afraid of the wicked, lazy servant. Right? In verse 27, you think, well, you look at the other slaves, they double. But look at verse 27. "Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest." Right? We know, even just in simple banking terms right now, here, if I put my money into the bank and receive it back with interest, I know it doesn't double. Right? It's going to take a while for it to double, right? Probably the extent of my own lifetime for it to double in a bank with interest, right? But the master was saying, it's okay. I don't need it to be double. I just need it to grow. And you didn't even do that. You didn't even use it for it to grow even a tiny bit. That would have been good enough for me. But you didn't do it. All right? So take heart on that. That as we're growing, it doesn't need to double. You don't need to double your skill set. It just needs to grow. And so what happens? Verse 28, again, one that I struggle with. Maybe this is where my son gets his righteousness of fairness somewhere deep down. The one that I struggle with, he says, verse 28, "Therefore take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. Well, hold on a second. I mean, I get it. Wicked and lazy. But can you give it to the one that has 4 talents at least? That we can have a little more? That guy? No. You give it to the one that has 10 talents. Now he's got 11 talents. You know, I had to think about that for a while. But why do the 10 talent one? Why do you think that? I think the 10 talent man is going to be able to take that $3 million that he had, and he's going to be able to do way more with it than the one that has got 4. The one that came up with 10 talents has got now a much bigger skill set. By giving it to him, he didn't need the money. He didn't need to have the money there, but because he has the skills that he has, and he went to procure those new skills that he did to grow those talents, adding another $3 million there wasn't going to do anything. And he was going to be able to use those talents to grow even more, to grow it exponentially, to multiply. He was fruitful, and he was multiplying. All right? He could have given us the one with 4 talents, but the one with 4 talents, while he would have grown, it would not have grown nearly as much as the one with 10 talents. It's a different skill set. To everyone who has more shall be given in abundance. But who does not have shall be taken away. Again, a difficult verse that I struggled with for many years, but I understand it better now. And God is expecting the growth there, right? When there's growth, there comes greater ability. And with greater ability comes greater abundance. But without growth comes atrophy, the loss of ability. Right? You can think of for yourself there. If you ever did something in your past. I was in band when I was in middle school or high school. And all right, pick up the horn you played earlier. So I couldn't do it now. No, you've lost that skill set. Right? It's kind of like riding a bike. You would say you never forget, but you get back on a bike after many years. It might take you a little while. Right? You've had atrophy. The skill sets that you have right now, if you don't use them, not only will you lose them, but you'll have less of it. All right? So that's what we take away from this year. The more that you develop those skills, the more that they grow. The less that you use them, the less you have them. And we know here in the parable that God expects the growth. And he demeans those that goes the opposite way. So 3 things to consider about growth as we wrap up here this morning. You don't reap in the same season that you sow. There's so much that we can talk about here about this. But you don't reap in the same season that you sow. Wherever you sow, you don't reap at the same time. It takes time, right? The benefits come later. So don't stop sowing. Keep sowing those seeds. Once you sow, you need to tend to the seed. You have to water it. You got to clean out the weeds. You got to protect it. And then after, you'll be able to reap what you have sown. All right, they have the saying about investment, right? The best time, when is the best time to invest? 10 years ago, right? What's the second best time to invest? Today, right? When you start sowing, sow today and keep sowing. Keep doing that. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 says, "Let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary." We don't reap when we sow. It takes time, right? When you invest in yourself or in others, it takes time. So let it keep going. Don't grow weary. 2, when you reap something different than what you sowed, right? You don't sow a seed and you get back a seed. I mean, yes, you get back a seed, but you have a variant of it, right? You get back the seed, you get back the whole tree, right? You get back the fruit and the leaves. You get back everything that comes with that, not just the seed. It's not a one-for-one transaction, right? When you set out to go learn something, you don't get back just the thing that you learned, right? And I think you can think to your own life here. Any experience you've had. When you go and learn a brand new skill, or you go through a brand new experience. You just have kids, or you get married, or you go on to a new job. Yeah, you went and did the thing that you went to go do, but you learned way more about that, about yourself, and about others as well, right? So when you sow the seed, what you reap back is way different than what you might have thought that you would have gotten. And 3, when you reap, it's kind of the same sort of idea, but when you reap, you get back more than what you sowed. Again, you don't put an apple, right? You don't sow an apple, not you would sow an apple, but you wouldn't sow an apple and get back an apple. Right? And the tree grows and there's one apple. That's not how it works. The seed is planted, the tree grows, and there's a multiplicity of apples. What you reap back once you sow. So think about who you invest in or what you work with here. When it comes back in a multiplicity of ways. This is where the abundance idea comes back to, the parable, right? Those who have more get back more, and there's an abundance. There it is. You are fruitful, and you what? You multiply. There's an abundance of it. It comes back not just one fold, but a multiplicity of it. And this reaping benefits you, yes, but it benefits everybody else around you as well. It's not just for your benefit. Matthew chapter 13, verse 23, "And the one on whom seed was sown on the good soil, this is the man who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and brings forth some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. Wow, isn't that awesome? When you compare it together with that, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. It didn't add, it multiplied, right? It became fruitful and it multiplied. You know, we can go on. This is just the beginning of it here. So I don't want to leave a few more practical ideas here as we conclude. But we can talk about the seasons, of how the seasons change, and when we plant the seed. We can talk about the soil, right? Or the type of seed, or how do we water it, or how do we keep the weeds out, or even the growth that happens underground. We can talk about so many different things about this here. But the truth is, no matter the difficulty or how uncomfortable it is, God expects each one of us to extend ourselves beyond our current capabilities. Whatever you can do right now, that's fantastic. It's great. It's good. Use that to grow it. God expects for it to continue to grow. To grow in patience requires what? Testing of the patience. To grow in courage requires that you face your fears. To grow in discipline and in perseverance requires that you have failures. Lots and lots of failures. So just like working out, once you decide to go and exercise, go and work out, you must first get what? Weaker. You have to get weaker first before you can get stronger. But leave no doubt, God expects us to get stronger for our own selves and for the sake of others. As we grow in our own talents and abilities, we also grow into becoming a better tool for God. Because of our personal development, God is able to take us and help those that need it. But can you imagine wanting to help but not having the capacity to do so? Not having the ability to do it? Just like Esther, who rose in the palace for such a time as this, or Paul, after all his training and his pedigree, became a Christian, God can use you to help those around, to bring people to faith, and to grow his purpose on this earth through his people. As you leave here this morning, I want you to think of something that you're good at right now. Just think of something that you're good at. If you're unsure, ask a trusted friend. They'll tell you. Now, what is the upgraded version of that thing that you're good at? What does that look like? Go and do that. Or perhaps you're aware of something that you want to work on, something that you want to improve on. Know this. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. That's the point. It's supposed to be. That's how you know you're on the right track. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4, it says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." So I encourage you to continue to grow. You need it. The people around you need it. God needs you to grow. It's important that we do that. Whatever your talents are, that they continue to be more than what they are currently. You continue to strive towards the difficulty and towards the trial there, because at the end of that, when you reap, you'll have reaped a multiplicity of what you've sown. You will become fruitful and you'll multiply. And that's what God expects of us. When we do that work, there's so much that the church can do, so much that the family can do, so much that can change in this world. But we continue to strive for that. You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it by yourself. There's others that have more talents than you. You can get help from them. There's others that have less talents than you. You can help them. And that's how we work together. It's important, though, as we finish off here, as a matter of invitation, I guess you could say, is that as we grow and as we're planted here, we have to be tied into the right tree. Although we can grow these talents, and there can be so much goodness in this world, if we're not tied to God and tied to Jesus, that growth eventually dies. It goes away. It's not rooted into something that's perpetual and everlasting. In John chapter 15, Jesus says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so that it may bear more fruit." There it is again, the difficulty, so that it can bear more fruit. "You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." So I encourage you all, this talk here, this sermon, these words of God, that we continue to grow. If you find yourself that you're not part of God's kingdom, that you are not a Christian, that you are not part of the vine that is Jesus, you can be grafted into that vine and continue to grow and continue to be blessed with that. Right? As I've heard it said, now's not the only time, but now's a good time to encourage you for that. Or if you're in need of encouragement, you feel like your talents have waned and you need help with that, by all means, people are here to help you. There's a lot of talent here. All right, so if there's anything that we can do as a matter of encouragement, let's go ahead and do it now. Let's go ahead and stand and sing.